The planets have aligned, and once again, the prophecy has come true. That's right, folks. It's time for another episode of the Roundtable Rethink Podcast. With me, your host, Uncle Paddy, joined every week by twin brother and spare parts bin, Andy, the asshole.
Woo, come
and of
on
course,
now.
This is the point in the podcast where we'd normally be apologising for Stevie Tel Avivi's absence. But not this week.
He's back. From outer space.
He just popped in to find you here.
With that look upon your face. Sorry, this is
The
not karaoke,
Philosopher
is it?
King has returned for 1 week only. Sadly,
week,
we're
yeah,
going
for
again
one night
next
only. Yeah, I'm
week.
back in a fortnight.
We'll take whatever we can get.
So, Stephen, tell us about just give us a short kind of summary of your 3-week absence. Tell us what you've been up to.
Been loving listening to you guys knocking out the park the last 2 podcasts. I think they've been fabulous. So enjoying that for as long as I can stay awake. That's me, not you guys. And spending some time with lots of interesting Americans and realizing, like all countries in the world, notwithstanding the political things that are going on at the moment, people are fundamentally nice. People have got their own thoughts and issues. One person does not reflect a country. And I've kind of a nice lesson maybe to come back with that, you know, there is things going on in the world here and abroad that not everyone agrees with.
Well, it's not been quite the same without you, mate. So it's wonderful to have you back, even if it's just for one podcast.
Yeah.
Okay, Paddy, what are we going to be discussing this week?
All right, let's rocket the docket. So this week, obviously, it's hard to avoid Grok 4. It's been the big news story, happened over the July 4th holiday weekend. We're going to be taking a deeper dive into prompt engineering. We slid over it nicely last week, but we're going to be diving a little bit deeper and going into some prompt engineering frameworks. It's part of our ongoing series about how to implement AI in a practical way inside your business. And then finally, we'll answer some of the big philosophical questions. We'll take advantage of having the philosopher king back himself. And we're going to talk about things like AI uptake inside business. Why is it so low?
What are the underlying
issues? Reasons for that? And then a big question that you've posed earlier, Stephen, which is how do you maintain these critical thinking skills, or how do new people coming through maintain these critical thinking skills in a world of AI? That and more all across the next 45 minutes, only here on the Roundtable Rethink Podcast. Right, okay.
Grok 4.
So let's start on Grok 4. So I'll kick us off here. So Grok 4 came out on the July 4th holiday weekend. It was a kind of weird, bizarre press conference. It was Elon and 3 team members from the XAI senior leadership team. Like all Elon press conferences, it felt a bit disjointed and weird, and sort of he's leading the whole thing and everybody else is sitting there shaking in absolute terror, trying to bolster some of the stuff he's saying. So here's the rub. They've announced Grok 4. It comes in 2 variants, Grok 4 and Grok 4 Heavy. By any measure,
It's the best reasoning model in the world.
it's the best reasoning model that's ever been created. And it's crushing every benchmark in almost every discipline. But that, I don't think, tells the whole story. So it's pretty clear now that having seen it in the wild and then putting it into the hands of people who actually review these things and compare them to other models, it's maybe not the enormous leap forward that it would appear to be on the benchmark. So let's start with the benchmarks and then we'll kind of work back from there. So if you took the world's most aggressive benchmark, which is humanity's last exam, we've talked about it on the podcast in the past. Humanity's last exam is a set of curated, 2,500 curated questions from domain experts, PhD domain experts on hundreds of different fields. Up until, I think, February this year, the most that any AI had scored in humanity's last exam was late single digits, early double digits. Grok seems to have vaulted over everybody on that and has, I think, with the Grok Heavy version, scored somewhere in the mid
44%.
Yeah. Which is an incredible achievement.
And to put that into context, like the smartest human on planet Earth could maybe get 1 or 2% on humanity's last exam.
Paddy, maybe 3.
But we are starting to find out more about how Grok is doing these extraordinary things. And so the truth is, what it's doing is it's using a technique called overfitting, which means it's thinking super duper harder and longer than any other AI. And it's actually spawning agentic workloads that are thinking in parallel. So imagine sending off a bunch of really smart people with 150 points at IQ, all to simultaneously work on a problem, then have them all come back at the same time with their conclusions, then synthesize and summarize the conclusions. That's basically how it's getting there. Now, as a result of that, it is unbelievably fucking slow. That's the first thing. So everybody is complaining about horrific performance, like minutes and minutes and minutes and minutes to get a response. And secondly, the cost of the tokens don't tell the whole story. So I think if you compared the token cost to something like Claude, which the last time I looked was about $60 per million output tokens, Grok 4 was like $15 to $20 per million output tokens. So that seems great, right? Wow, it's much smarter than Claude, and it's a third of the price of the output tokens. Here's the issue. If it's thinking for 8 to 10 times longer, you are paying for all the thinking tokens as well.
Yep.
And so to get similar output or slightly better output than Claude in real world tasks,
or O3 or whatever.
it could actually be more expensive from a token perspective. So again, these things always seem great on the surface. And I don't want to discredit anything that's happened here. By any measure, it's a stunning, super smart, really, really, really impressive piece of work by the XAI team. It just might not be as rosy as it would appear on the benchmarks.
And so before we go into what it does well and what it is yet, or what it needs to do better, I do think it's worth just taking a wee pause there and just wrapping your head around that 26 months ago, XAI didn't exist.
Yeah.
They gave everybody else a multi-year start and come out of nowhere 26 months ago. And in that 26 months have came for the back of the pack to the number one reasoning model on planet Earth.
There's another side to that story, though, which is the second mouse always gets the cheese.
Yeah.
You know, there is something about the benefit.
But they were this 20-second mouse,
yep.
and that's what's so impressive about it.
But it does seem to have been optimized, and honestly, it feels like it came out the oven just a wee bit too early. And Elon is consistently guilty of this crime over and over again. You feel like if they'd just taken another month to put a bit of polish and fit and finish on it, it would have been a much better early experience for people interacting with it. And we see that as a pattern with Elon's companies over and over again.
And I know we kind of touched on this earlier, but is that why we end up with these horrible pro-Nazi mechanized talks that we get? Is it just a lack of preparation, or is there something fundamentally wrong with the model?
Well, they actually issued a statement as to exactly what happened there, didn't they, Paddy? I think you've got something here.
Yeah, so pull it up, Jamie. So I've pulled up what the explanation is, at least Perplexity's digest of the explanation, and so I'll read it. It says, XAI, the company behind Grok, explained that the chatbot's Nazi propaganda and anti-Semitic posts were the result of a software update that inadvertently made Grok more likely to mirror extremist content from X users. Here's how they broke it down. 1. Technical glitch and deprecated code. XAI stated that an instruction set glitch and a deprecated code path were introduced during a recent update. This change made Grok susceptible to picking up and amplifying extremist views from user posts for about a 16-hour period of time. And I think we all saw examples of that when we were on X at that point. The company emphasized that the issue was independent of the underlying language model that powers Grok, meaning it was a problem with the instructions guiding Grok's behavior, not the AI's core training. They've apologized and it's subsequently been fixed.
So it turns out that having that walled garden to yourself of all the X data, all the tweets that are on there, billions of them a day, is a bit of a blessing and a curse.
But it does seem to be that it's the typical Elon scenario of get it out there fast, and if it explodes, we'll go back and re-engineer it, rather than perhaps other more conservative models that come out, I just say, fully baked and good to go.
So if you wanted the antithesis of that, then Anthropic's Claude would be, so Claude are very slow to release, but what they release is like fully baked, battle-tested, red-teamed, consistent, professional.
Yeah.
It's like the adult in the room.
Yeah.
And so Claude certainly for agentic tasks and code generation tasks, by far the most capable model.
But what you do have to say
that
about Elon's
exists.
approach is it's a move fast and break things approach, but it is the tactics that's allowed them come from the back of the pack
It's
to the
probably
front
the
of
only
pack.
approach he can deploy. I mean, fundamentally, if you're coming from behind, you maybe don't have the luxury of what the guys at Anthropic are doing.
And when you launch the new Grok, that was the question I was asking earlier, is it then out the oven and ready, or will it continue to develop in the weeks and months ahead?
It will continue to develop. So one thing that I think is underappreciated by most people is that the models are continuously being improved. Even though the version number don't
Despite
change,
the naming conventions, and
they don't launch any documentation for this, and they don't tell you it's happening, and you kind of have to find this out when you listen to interviews with Sam Altman and some of the technical team that give deep dive interviews about how this stuff works. But yeah, 4.0, which has been about for a long time now, is constantly being updated. Now that's a double-edged sword. Its capabilities are improving and it's becoming more consistent. But it's also the reason why one day that you wake up and your GPT that you built that's been working consistently for 4 months, now the outputs have turned to shit. And there's no fucking explanation for it at all.
all the outputs that were shit have now became perfect overnight. So it inverts the other way as well. The bottom line is they're continually changing. Now, one of the things that I did want to touch on is it does, so obviously we've already discussed, because it's a reasoning model, it does out and out intelligence really well, research papers, in the future, new scientific breakthroughs, new physics. The things that it doesn't do well just now that they're actually working on is, I don't think it does vision well.
Yep.
So they're working on a separate vision model.
And they're working on a dedicated
code
generation
model. I don't think it does code generation very well.
Well, I
at the
listened
moment.
to you guys talking about this a couple of weeks ago, which is it's what AI is becoming all about, understanding the tool for the job.
Yeah.
So
100%. There is no one AI that covers all the bases.
no one ring to rule them
There is,
all.
at least at the moment, there's no one ring to rule them all. So now here's the really interesting thing. What we know for sure is ChatGPT 5 has been on the shelf for months, and we know that it has similar, maybe even better benchmark scores and capabilities than Grok 4. So don't think there's now going to be some big long period of time here where everybody tries to catch up to Grok 4. I would not be surprised that if in the next
Before the end of the month?
2 to 4 weeks, then you see launches from guys like ChatGPT, some new rev on the Gemini model.
Gemini
and some new
3.0.
The reason that all these guys are optimizing for code generation models is right now, at least, that's where the most value is being captured. And because these code generation models are so valuable, it's also, look at the arc of where the subscriptions for these products are heading. These things all started life as 20 quid a month products. Well, guess what? See, if you want ChatGPT Enterprise account now, that's a $60 a month account. If you want Claude and you want to make more than 4 requests an hour using their Opus model for code generation, guess what? You need the $200 a month max plan. So you're starting to see now, and here's the big dirty fucking secret in this whole token thing. The current price points at what we're serving tokens at are completely and utterly unsustainable.
They're probably 5 to 6 times. You're accessing tokens at probably 5 to 6 times their true market value.
Yeah.
But they're also
5-6 times less than their true market value.
but they've been acquiring customers.
Yeah.
And that's been the model.
Totally.
Secondly, the price of production of coins will collapse eventually.
Yeah, tokens,
So ultimately it's a replay of previous software type business models.
You've got people emptying the bank right now trying to capture share.
Yeah.
And so Google's attempt at that was they gave away 2.5 Pro as a command line tool, as a CLI. If you're a programmer and you're running a Gemini 2.5 Pro CLI on your tool, they gave away it was some absurd budget, like 50 million tokens a month for free. Mm-hmm. As a reaction to basically every developer in the world now using Claude 4 Sonnet to do code generation. So Google can't afford Claude to run away with code generation. So they're they don't have a as capable model. So they're trying to respond with pricing. Mm-hmm. And then you're going to see Grok participate in that. And you're seeing OpenAI participate in that with Codex. But these tokens are being given away right now for a fraction of what they're actually being cost to produce.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, the plans in the future, they're all going to be $100, $150, $200 a month plans. That's where they should be. But right now, people are in this loss leader mode where they're just trying to capture
drive adoption
at any cost.
We'll come back to this at the end.
I think OpenAI loses $5 billion a year.
Yeah, we'll come back to this at the end.
With $30 billion worth of revenue, or $25 billion worth of revenue.
But if you want to learn about AI, you want to work it now while it's cheap.
So just to put a pin in the Claude chat before we move on for that, do we want to touch a wee bit on what has facilitated this quantum leap forward in terms of intelligence, the few different vectors that they're scaling on? So we know that Grok 3 was trained on 100,000 H100s.
Yeah.
We know that with the new Colossus cluster, they're up to 340,000 GPUs training coherently. A lot of them the new GPUs. So a lot of them GB200s and some GB300s. So to put that into context, a GB200 might be 5, 6, 7 times more compute than an H100. So we've got exponentially more compute available as they continue to scale up towards 1 million GPUs. So they're scaling on that axis. The other thing that they've done as well is they are starting to rewrite the entire corpus of publicly available human information on the internet. So the traditional training approach was, it turns out a lot of the publicly available information on the internet is trash.
Yeah.
So the way that
most data is private.
Aye.
Think about all the corpus of data every company's got in their CRM and their digital asset management system and all these systems of record that run your company. None of that's publicly available information. And it turns out that is most data.
Yeah.
So there are massive limitations to training just on publicly available information.
So the way that that's been dealt with historically is there was a bunch of exception handling, millions of exception handling scripts written to deal with that. Elon's approach, again, because he always goes back to first principles, is as you find data that's if you can verify that something's incomplete or incorrect, instead of writing exceptions for it, just go and correct the data. So fill in the stuff that's incomplete or correct a record on that particular data. You do that with a lot of cross-reference and evaluation from other third-party sources to make sure that you know it's incorrect before you go and correct it. Mm-hmm. And by doing that, you're basically cleaning up the entire corpus of publicly available information. So if you've got the best model and the most compute and you've got the cleanest version of the internet to train on, or the most truthful version of the internet to train on, then these are the things that get you this kind of quantum leap forward in terms of...
So I don't want to throw a whole bunch of cold water on the whole LLM thing, but it is important to note that prompt engineering, which we're coming on to next, is the only way of directing the output of LLMs, is still a very brittle tool.
Yeah,
it's a very imprecise, very inconsistent,
generalized tool. Yeah,
because I won't go into it, but I've been having this argument through the week with different people. Don't forget how models are actually trained. So the first thing a model does is it memorizes the training data. It's basically does a training run which shows it the training data and it memorizes it. Then it's continued to do training runs and see the same set of training data, and that process is called epochs. And then there's a sweet spot when you've done enough epochs, the model can actually go from memorizing the data to generalizing. It can generalize extrapolations from the data it's memorized, which makes it so universally useful across an enormous amount of different things. But it is fundamentally still generalizing. And so the reason that is problematic is, although prompt engineering and the quality of prompts can massively impact the output delivered by these LLMs, it is still a freaking brittle and non-perfect way of directing the output of these things.
Because unless you...
I can't help thinking we're going to have to come up with a better solution in the future.
Because unless you're using the most advanced models like O3 or Opus 4, if you're just using ChatGPT 4.0, the prompt adherence, its ability to accurately interpret every word that you want it to do and then go and carry out those actions flawlessly is very poor. But the best models are good at it. but they're costly to access and run at scale.
It reminds me when you talk that way very much about the human mind works. You think about it. How do you get good at something? You memorize it. You just keep repeating it. Go back to studying. When you know it well enough, you start to generalize it.
Yeah.
But when someone asks you a question, the question is going to be specific to trigger in you the right responses.
Yeah.
So, we have the same conversation. If I ask you 3 different questions, you'll give me 3 different answers depending. So it sounds so human-like when you actually talk about it that way.
It is the reason why if you ask an LLM to create you a story about 3 little pigs who live in a wood, and you ask it the same prompt 3 times, it will generate 3 completely different sets of output. That's what I'm saying. So that lack of recreatability, that lack of consistency in the output is what makes these things amazing and also makes them difficult to make
also a limitation
and
as well.
agentic workflows consistent.
But I know this is probably where we're going to be going because we've talked this before. So ultimately, speaking to an LLM is like speaking to an old wise person who knows a bit about everything. But we're really thinking more about SLMs, specific language models, small language models, which are your experts. It's your specialist elbow doctor who only knows about elbows and therefore only is going to think about elbows, talk about elbows, and you're just giving that as much information about elbows as you can.
Prompt adherence is huge. Like, unless you can trust the model to interpret and carry out the instructions on the prompt, you're always going to be hobbled with what you can do with these things. Now, the good news is O3 is fabulous at prompt adherence, and I am assured, although I haven't tested it yet, that Grok 4 is the same. So we are approaching this level where these things
Here's the only problem. With these reasoning models, they're too expensive to run on every prompt. You had to buy the $200 a month version of ChatGPT because you're having to use... To get the level of prompt adherence you need to run your GPT that is valuable for your business, you're having to run the most expensive version
model
of ChatGPT's models and take all the latency latency hit because they're taking sometimes 60 seconds to come back with the answer, right? So you're sitting waiting for answers.
Generally somewhere between 30 and 60 seconds. But because
right
we use it as an
that's the only way you can make it work.
And as an internal tool that's highly valuable, we're happy to pay that cost, both in terms of time and money, because it's still relatively small in terms of what we get for that, across the piece.
Okay. That's probably enough on that then. It's a nice segue into prompt engineering itself. So let's take a deeper dive, or as much of a deeper dive as we can really afford to, in maybe 5 or 10 minutes to spend on it. So what, do we take it back to basics? Let's prompting?
Just recap what we spoke about the last couple of weeks in terms of the strategy pieces. So we spoke about how, in this whole series of how to practically deploy AI inside your business, we spoke about the strategy behind it, why it's important. We spoke about identifying that the innovation had to come from the departments themselves, that the person that's in the weeds in customer service all day knows where all the problems are, and that's where all the prompt innovation is going to come from. We spoke about the importance of having centralized prompt library for as you're building these things. So
standards and governance.
But what we didn't touch on is actually what is a prompt, what is the architecture of a prompt, what are the different types of prompts, the anatomy of a prompt. And that's what we're going to make a start on now. So not sure exactly where you want to kick this off, but we'll just recap by saying the prompt is the instructional language in which you will communicate with the LLM and what you're trying to get it to do.
And I think from my point of view, probably been the least technical of the three of us, is let's go back to basics. We know what a prompt is, but how do I then start to make a good prompt that's going to be consistent? What are the key features that create good consistent prompting?
So the best way to think about prompting is so if you take the AI industry is fucking terrible at coming up with these silly words. I don't even like the word prompt. Prompt is just a question you're asking AI to try and direct the output that you're looking for. That's it. The industry's terrible for that. RAG, retrieval augmented generation.
Just buzzwords.
MCP, model context protocol. Oh, what's that? It sounds like it's something that might bust out the fucking sofa and kill me. And it's taking very simple things, concepts, and making them sound so freaking intellectual and difficult. So prompting, all you're trying to get to with prompting is maximum clarity.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yep.
How can you be as clear and specific to the LLM as possible about the output you're trying to get to? That is all it is.
In a
And
nutshell.
what we all know about language is by its nature imprecise. Language itself is interpretational, and therefore what you're trying to do is to create as little leeway for the AI to misinterpret. So how do we speak in a way that's clear, concise, and gives us on paper the least chance of the AI giving us bad results?
Well, the answer is you need to work with one of the well-defined frameworks that people prompt within. So I'll give you an example of one that we have here.
Before you go into that, can I just say one last thing? Because I think it's a good mental model for thinking about it. Somebody once told me, like, think about an LLM as a really smart intern that you've just been buddied up with at work. Okay, so you're the experienced person at work. They've gave you a really smart intern. And so however you would feed instructions to that really smart intern to get work done on their first 1 or 2 days inside the business is almost the same pattern on how you should speak to LLMs.
Okay.
And for me, that was a great visual,
Yeah.
and I could totally understand what somebody meant when they said that. So that is a really good framework for thinking about how to communicate with LLMs. Andy, pick up the story.
Well, but just within these frameworks, so the one that we're going to just cover here, and again, there are many frameworks, and to be honest, they all tend to be a kind of derivative of each other.
they are.
So the one that we're going to cover here is called RACE. So RACE is role, action, context, and execute. That is the 4 constituent parts of the prompt in terms of how it's architected. Now, for anybody at the moment that doesn't think they're a good enough writer to write a prompt, or they're not creative enough, or they don't have a good enough grasp at English, I always think using this framework, and you do have to use the framework, craft your best effort at the prompt, and then use a model. Like there's models that will help you improve the prompt in terms of the layout, the structure, the clarity.
If you can get
Put it in
70%
markdown
of the way
format.
there,
Yeah.
you can go to Gemini 2.5 and go, here's my shitty prompt. Please help me make
It will
my
improve-
shitty prompt
yeah.
a really, really good prompt. And Gemini will rewrite the prompt for you. All right, insert model here.
Yeah.
It will improve the layout to the point that makes it even clearer and even more instructional. So let's start with role. So what would be a good example for this? So the world that I'm in is marketing, right? So you say, so the role for this particular prompt is...
And by role, we mean you're assigning
You're
the
assigning-
LLM a role.
yeah.
You're telling it the role, the persona that you want it to take on.
Yeah. You're an expert copywriter with 20 years experience of Coast Entertainments and their premium suite of live wedding and party bands, right? So that would be an example of a role.
Yeah.
So straight away you're telling the AI who they are, what kind of experience, what kind of domain expertise they've got, so that it can start, and its mixture of experts start feeding from that pool of knowledge.
So, quick question. My experience of humans is we're all a bit lazy. We all like to cut things. We don't like sitting there typing things forever.
Yeah.
Is there a benefit from making it longer, and can you make it too long?
No, I don't think you can make it too long. There's a massive benefit to making it longer.
Yeah.
She said.
Remind me to tell you about my mother-in-law on Friday night. Anyway, sorry.
Oh, dear.
Yes.
Maybe we're making it thicker, not longer.
Sorry.
Yes.
We apologise to any children.
Let's keep it PG-13.
So, so LLMs are context hungry. Okay, they need as much context about the problem you're trying to solve as possible.
Are you getting ahead of yourself?
But to answer Stephen's question directly, of course, nobody wants to go to that effort every single time they write a prompt. So for a specific problem you're trying to solve, you want to write the prompt once, store it, and then be able to reuse it to solve a similar problem again.
So let's get back to the framework here. So the first one was role. So we're assigning the AI a role. You're an expert copywriter with 20 years of experience marketing Coast Entertainment's premium stable of wedding and party bands. So that would be a half decent attempt at a role. Action. So action is what is it that you're trying to do? So you'll be creating compelling Facebook and Instagram ad copy that builds desire and excitement in future wedding couples when they read this, about insert band here.
Yeah.
So that would be a
So
decent.
what action do you want the LLM
What action
to
do
take
you
from
want the LLM to take? And then this is the big one: context.
Context is everything.
Yeah. And it's as much information as you can give it at this point. You have to be cognizant of these following documents. Document number 1 is the customer avatar document. Document number 2 is the contextual information about our customer, all their wants and fears and desires and all the things that they want their wedding to work at. You need to be contextually aware of all the pros and cons of everything that our bands can do based on, these documents.
The key value proposition,
Key value
our tone of voice
proposition.
that we want to talk in. So this is all the context you're providing. You want the AI to be aware of all this stuff as it's thinking about compiling an answer.
Taking something like law, which is very highly regulated, accountancy, all these things, you could point it at the Law Society of Scotland or England's rules and regulations, say, and you must comply with all of the rules contained within this schedule of
100%.
Okay, so you can actually tell it to be compliant.
But it is just worth just pausing on this context thing for a minute, because I think people just think, well, context is what's your product or service. It needs to know everything. It needs to know your brand voice. It needs to know what your customer looks like. It needs to know what your product looks like. It needs to know about anything that's differentiated about your service offering, or any guarantees that you offer. You cannot input enough context at this point. And then, so that's the third part of it. And then execute is, what do you want the output to be? So once you've done all of this, you will produce 175 to 225 words of thingy in this voice at this output that builds this desire in the customer. And you tell it should be in a conversational language that's friendly and warm but still professional, or enthusiastic but still professional. And so you basically prescribe how you want the output to look.
And going back to last week, once you've done all that hard work, you save it, you store it, and you just amend it next time rather than have to retype it all again.
Exactly. You want to put it in a prompt database that the whole company can leverage, and then build that up over time, which becomes this really powerful proprietary asset that takes all the work out of. So in the future, new employees who've not done any of this just go, right, I'm in the market department, I want to write a LinkedIn post. They go to your prompt database, they filter on marketing, they type in LinkedIn, they see an amazing 10-paragraph long prompt that contains all the context of the business, the value prop, the problems that you're trying to solve, maybe even product benefits and features, and then your prompt profiles, which in the marketing department would be your tone of
Paddy,
voice.
before you go, and there's one thing that we haven't discussed here, which is, before you do any of that, once you've created your kind of best version of your foundational prompt, you need to check if it works first, if it's getting you the desired output. Because I've done prompts that I thought were the absolute shit and they produced complete trash, and I had to go back and just completely start from scratch with them again. So there's a whole user testing of prompts. So once you've designed the prompt, and then you've said to O3, using the RACE prompt net framework, this is my best guess at a prompt. You're a world-class prompt engineering expert that deals with blah, 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 and you use the same framework on it, improve this prompt from maximum GPT adherence or whatever. Once you get that final draft, you have to test that final draft and make sure it's getting the quality of output that you're looking for. And if it doesn't, you need to go back and fucking start from scratch again.
And you need to test it on different models.
Yes.
So that prompt might work better on GPT-4o, or if it's a research prompt, you might be better with Perplexity or O3, one of the big reasoning models. If it's a prompt to generate code.
If it's a retrieval prompt, that's a hard one. If you've got a retrieval with a bunch of different variables, that's the one that we had to work really hard to crack.
And from what you're saying, you also have to diary it forward to check it every 1 to 3 months that nothing's changed within the system to affect the validity
100%.
of your prompt.
Yeah.
But assuming all that's true and you've wrote a good foundational prompt, you've used O3 or one of the more advanced models to structure it in an even better way, nice markdown format that the systems absolutely love because they're so linear, they're so step by step, they're so clear. Assuming that you've done all of that and you're getting the output that you want from it and you're amazed by the output that's coming from it, then you save it to your centralized prompt library. Codify that information so that you never have to do that again. And that any time you've got an inquiry of that type, you just I actually use a browser extension. So even within ChatGPT, I just go right-click.
What's the product you use, Andy?
Right-click prompt.
So right-click prompt, think it's free, right?
Is a browser extension, yeah. Chrome browser extension.
I think for small teams and solo operators, I think that's a great tool. It might not be appropriate for bigger companies who need to collaborate, different teams that need to collaborate on prompts. There's another one called Prompt Hub. Prompt Hub's really good. It's a paid product, but as a centralized repository for your prompts, and it also has a gazillion prompts in a prompt library that you can go and browse. And that is another great way to figure out how to write good prompts. Just go and look at 50 examples of that's already been done really well by somebody else.
And I know that some of those, people are going to be looking at it going, that's a lot of work. So, and am I going to get the benefits for putting all that effort in? I'm assuming that we only foresee that the variance will become less and less with time. I.e., the chances are that it will settle, that your prompts will get, that with the same input, the output will get better.
As the models get more sophisticated, the outputs will get better.
The time will become less.
And the truth is, you don't really need to update them. If it's a really well written prompt and you're getting good, the chances you having to rewrite it again are very, very small. Where was I going with that?
But see, I don't know if I agree with that. I don't think you're going to one-shot a great prompt.
No.
I think great prompts mature over time and then you tweak and refine. I mean, the iterative part of this is foundational to prompt engineering. So,
and there's a structural part to this. I told you guys earlier that I created a custom GPT and I loaded in a bunch of kind of prompt documentation to the GPT itself beyond the system prompt. And I've actually had to re-architect that whole thing and just leave the core information in there and then just use the user prompts to retrieve the right pieces of core information as I want. So you're right, there is a kind of structure and architecture piece here that does change over time.
So there really is a position in the future for someone who's really doing nothing in an organization but ensuring that the prompts are kept up to date, sharp, fresh, relevant. It's not something it's not a one-hit wonder. This is going to be endemic in a business process moving forward.
And you ideally want hundreds of prompts in a business that the team have access to. Because remember, Paddy, actually, you made this point this morning at breakfast, Paddy. When all the 4 or 5 main model makers have something resembling the same amount of intelligence, well, what is your competitive weapon or competitive advantage at the company level? You're basically accessing the same level of intelligence. So the difference between me getting a 10 times better output than you is just the quality of your prompt.
Yeah.
Because we're all accessing the same level of intelligence, right?
Accessing.
Yeah.
So if you just go, create me a LinkedIn post that sells a band, you're just going to get generic AI slop because there's not enough context to come up with something that's super unique that speaks in Coast Entertainment's voice.
To Coast Entertainment's customer, about Coast Entertainment's
your prompts and the quality of prompts are your competitive advantage.
Yeah.
They're a proprietary business asset that cannot be recreated.
And by the way, they'll be incredibly valuable IP in the future as well.
Totally.
If you're selling a company and you've got a repository of 750 prompts that are producing millions of pounds a year's worth of revenue, that will be taken into consideration in terms of the overall valuation of your business.
100%.
Okay.
So I think, is that as much as well? So I think that's a good place for I really want this to be practical. So everybody Google the RACE prompt engineering framework, role, action, context, execute, fill in the blanks of each of them. So you're assigning a role, you're telling the LLM the action you want to do, you want it to take, you're giving it the maximum amount of context possible in order to execute and get the best possible outcome for yourself. That's a really good place to start.
I think there's a good point made this morning, which is a great prompt has a feel to it.
Yeah.
And that feel only comes with action.
100%.
I.e., you can't just make one. You have to try. And like everything else you do in life, it's like a golf swing. You're going to slice the ball, hook the ball until eventually you feel, I've hit that right.
The more of them you create, the more of them you create, the more of a feel you get for it. There's things
There's a reason vibe coding is called vibe coding, because you kind of feel when you're in the flow, you feel when it's working well and you're in a groove, and that's why it's called vibe coding. There is a vibe to it.
Yeah.
A lot of this is more about EQ than it is about IQ. You can I can sniff the air now and know that that's a good prompt just with a glance.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, there's something about time on the tools, building these things, reviewing the output. When you do that enough, you just get a feel for it.
And by the way, just on the efficiency point, Stephen, that you mentioned earlier, going, well, it sounds like it's a lot of time to create a prompt, but remember, it's a create once, get value from forever exercise.
Yeah.
And I would, for anybody dipping their toes in this, don't try and create 20 prompts in a day. Create one prompt and then refine it. Go into O3, refine it, add wee bits yourself, because it will add in things that are potentially not relevant as well. I find if I try and create more than one prompt a day, I'm just trying to get through too much work, so I lose quality in the prompt itself. So if you create one prompt a day, in a month you've got 30 prompts there, and that will cover a lot of the use cases inside your businesses.
Across the business.
100%.
Yeah. And what an asset for new people joining the company to have access to a prompt library like that. And that brings us quite nicely on to maybe our final question of the podcast, which is, so let's take that to its conclusion. We have a prompt library full of pre-formatted prompts that are blessed by the company, that have all the company's tone of voice, their guidance, their governance, their standards, and they produce really killer output. What's left for employees? How do employees now become copy-paste monkeys, and how do they retain their critical thinking skills?
I've seen this a lot, and what comes to my mind, and again, I'm not sure it's the right analogy, but you look at, I see students who are super smart, no basic understanding of arithmetic. The question, I suppose, is do they need to understand arithmetic anymore? But that's a fair point. But how do you, in the future, learn about how a business operates without actually doing all the hard work? So, are we going to just make people that are nothing more than prompt monkeys? Mm-hmm. How do we make the future entrepreneurs, the future business developers who can back to feel, they can feel a business before it actually happens, when they're so used to just getting prompts?
It's a great philosophical question. I think if you're already a killer in that role and you went through the fire of learning that thing, the analog way of using your brain and repetition and all that stuff, and now you've got access to AI, it kind of makes you superhuman. You're taking all the experience and the skills that you built up having to learn that thing the hard way. Now you plug in AI, which is a capability expansion tool,
and you become superhuman.
Every employee to do more, then you become superhumanly productive, or you become superhumanly efficient. If you're a new employee who never went through the fire of learning that the hard way, and now all of a sudden you've got these tools that kind of short circuit a lot of the process and produce world-class output without you having to go through the learning curve of how to produce world-class output. Yeah, there is a part of me thinks that does diminish the ability to have these critical thinking skills and these learning.
Let me give you a perfect example, and you'll probably both understand this from programming. You, at your core, are a programmer. Mm-hmm. You will spot on a page or on a sheet, however you do it, a piece of bad code. You just see it, and it'll jump out at you because you'll know what bad code looks like. For me, with title deeds, I would see something and my eye would just immediately go to it because I would know that doesn't look normal, doesn't look right. But when you've never done that time on the physical side of the tools, how do you know when AI is spitting out something that's not right or doesn't fit right? And it's how do we ensure that the next generation, because it's the problem we've got at the moment, we're not seeing people coming through, certainly in law and in other industries, and pushing the industries forward. How do we ensure that we have the next generation 20 years down the line?
So I'm just thinking about it in real time here, and one of the things that occurred to me just as I'm kind of listening to you talk there is there won't actually be the opportunity to be a prompt monkey in the sense that, so let's say, for example, somebody said you're in a lawyer's office, right? For every title deed inquiry that comes through, that's a prompt there. Just copy, paste, return, send the output, go, because the company's pre-approved the output. Well, you could technically get away with that for a while, but essentially you're one or two automation nodes away from being taken out the loop. So if the output has already been pre-approved by the company and the prompt's already been pre-approved for the company, what value you add in? If you're just going to copy and paste, then there's definitely an automation that can do that for you. So I don't think there'll be the opportunity just to be a prompt monkey in that sense, where you can just literally switch your brain off and copy and paste. And by the way, a lot of this comes down to leadership and mentorship inside of businesses. Like, do companies really want automaton, brainless, copy and paste or prompt monkeys. No, they want smart people with critical thinking skills inside their business. So there's probably going to be more of a requirement for mentorship, because there's things that you already
It'll
have.
be different. I mean, I think one of the things you have to consider is while people are tied up in the mundane drudgery of producing, I'm trying to work out how to say it without sounding disparaging, because I certainly don't mean it to sound disparaging, but low-level work, right?
Yeah.
Admin, compliance,
Facebook posts,
regulation.
LinkedIn posts.
Yeah.
It's all very
Yeah.
mechanizable these days. So for me, let's not fight that battle. But while people were engaged in that and we didn't have these tools, what were the other higher value problems they are not working on?
Yeah.
And so I don't think it's about getting rid of a bunch of people. I think if a company had a choice to say, right, companies want to do more, companies want to grow, companies want to expand. So you've got a choice. Do you want to produce the same unit of work with 25% less people because AI came along and made everything more efficient? Or do you want to produce 30% more work with the same corpus of people? You want to produce 30% more work with the same corpus of people,
Of course you
right?
do, but that's not the question.
I was going to say that the difficulty, and I don't disagree with anything you've said, but what we need is the future business owners, the future managers, the future developers, and the way that we all learn. Back to what you said about how AI learns, it repeats and
Recursive self-improvement, yeah.
yeah, and without working at the sharp end, how do we as humans understand in our bones a process and take it forward? And it may be that we don't need to. Maybe business entrepreneurship moving forward will come into a different sphere. It will just be about how do we better manage human interactions? How will we better expand new services or into new areas? But there's definitely going to be something about maintaining critical thinking in the human element of your business, which, if we're not careful, will be dumbed down without some additional form of learning, training, or focus.
Because there's always going to, we spoke about this the other day, that the temptation is just automate everything away to zero, take the human out of the loop. We actually came to the conclusion, we were talking about this the other day, there's a real value to having a human in the loop, just purely from a quality control perspective, right? You can't just blindly let this stuff churn out outputs that are getting uploaded to places that the public can see or customers and stuff can see. There needs to be a human in the loop. So you're right, just that strategic brain to say, right, I'm not going to be typing all the stuff in and typing all the stuff out, but I am going to be looking down on this with a critical eye saying, that doesn't look quite right. Let's go in, let's amend that draft, let's change a few things on it there.
Yep.
So I do think, just generally speaking, people want good quality people in their businesses. I don't think they're just going to hire copy and pasters, because that job will get automated away a bit.
Supervising the output. I mean, I think I've used this analogy before, but the airline pilot analogy is a great analogy for future knowledge workers. I mean, you'll largely be supervising highly automated systems, but we don't take the pilot out of the cockpit, and we won't take the people out of the business. Their jobs will evolve, and they'll be there to supervise output. And the companies who properly embrace this will do more.
If you take that to its logical conclusion, though,
And there'll be more to supervise the output of.
yeah, but it's going to mean consolidation of businesses, because output will become easier. So to grow will become easier. Therefore, you can do more with less. So it's what we've always said. We're going to end up with, in the short term, less people being employed in most industries.
Yeah.
Movement towards more and more centralization as people just grow, because that's going to be easier to grow. And then a hand picking of the best. So ultimately it's going to be the best. The ones that are emotionally intelligent, entrepreneurially intelligent will rise, because they'll have all of that. But it's going to be a tough place to be unless you can move above being a prompt monkey.
Stephen, you're absolutely right. There's going to be a Darwinian aspect to this, which is the incentive structure will be set up, because companies will only hire people that have got strategic thinking skills and critical thinking skills that can look down on these systems and identify problems and bugs and things as they come up. That will then filter into education and into the job search market, which you should, ipso facto, if you don't have those skills, You're going to find it very hard to get gainfully employed.
Or at least in the traditional admin. I mean, I think we all agree that kind of, if you're looking for career advice from this podcast, it'd be a prompt engineer or an electrician.
Yeah.
Or a butcher.
Absolutely.
Yeah, an apprentice butcher.
But no, a hairdresser, because I saw a robot barber earlier in the week, which was incredible.
Yeah. Not a problem in my case.
There
But
goes my Turkish barber.
All right. Well, I don't know if we answered that, but we certainly had a go at just kicking it round a bit. Listen, loads of difficulties and problems coming up for society. You know, we've not even talked about where's education and all this. Fucking MIA, missing in action, right? Fucking generation of kids right now left to figure all this out for themselves. It's some of this stuff is criminal, and we're going to have to deal with the societal effects. And we've talked about it on the podcast before. Transitions are tough. They've always been tough for the people who had to live through them. We will get to the other side of this, and who knows, economically, the economy might be 1,000 times the size, 1,000,000 times the size.
But you're not going to be able to save everybody, and that's just that's
but
always been
transitions
the
are
way
tough,
of it.
and it will be tough for a lot of folk that are unable to do the learning curve.
Stephen, I think you just wanted to have a couple of minutes as we finish up here on our last topic, which is just the lack of uptake amongst small to medium-sized businesses in terms of AI usage and why that might be.
you know, my old analogy, which is the boy walks past the man with the dog and says, "Mister, why is your dog whimpering?" And he says, "Because he's sitting in a nail, sonny." "Why is he sitting in a nail, mister?" Because it's not sore enough for him to get off it yet.
Yeah.
And I told you the story about sending one of the podcasts recently to someone close to me and saying, "I can see the future. If you do nothing else, listen to this podcast and learn to prompt." And the answer was nothing.
A deafening wall of silence.
And that doesn't make that person wrong, but it does. I see this constantly. I see it in some of the stuff on LinkedIn. I hear it in industries when I'm speaking to people. People are going, "Oh yeah, I use my AI to redraft my text to my mother. I use my AI to redraft a letter to such and such." No one's really doing the work which you guys have done to understand the stuff and see the benefit. And I keep asking myself, why? Is it
because it's hard? It's really freaking hard. And it takes a tremendous amount of time.
Yeah.
I consume 20 hours of podcasts a week, watch hundreds of videos a week on this subject, and feel like I've still got so much to learn.
It's
overwhelming.
It's a combination of overwhelm and probably laziness as well.
100%. You're competing with entertainment.
So much things competing for your attention.
Fucking Netflix is the problem.
Like, it's so much easier to watch YouTube than it is to watch a video on how to hook up a node for an NAN automation. You need to be a wee bit fucking all right in the head like us to spend your nights doing that. But for most people, their attention's getting pulled from pillar to post with TikTok and all the wonderful entertaining things that they have in their life. So there's a bit of laziness, but I do think the overwhelm dynamic is very real, because the more that you see these things doing, there's vision models, there's video models, there's code generation models, as well as all the kind of foundational stuff. When people could conceive of the one or two use cases, they would start playing with it. But now that they're starting to get an understanding of just how many things it can do, it almost makes it less likely for you to get off the starting blocks.
It's the age-old thing, Stephen. I don't even think it's any different to anything in the past. It's the doing part that's the problem.
Yeah.
That's where everybody comes unstuck, when they have to go and do something. And you cannot learn this through osmosis, watching something on your phone while watching fucking reruns of Friends on Netflix. You've got to concentrate, and you've got to figure it out, and you've got to spend dedicated time, and you've got to be on the tools. It's not a classroom environment type thing. It's a learn by doing skill set. It's the most learn by doing skill set I've ever experienced in my entire life.
Other than the analogy you gave me this morning, the swimming analogy was a good example, right?
You cannot learn to swim by fucking reading books about swimming. You've got to fucking throw yourself in a swimming pool and start swimming.
And this is the disadvantage of age. You know, I'm getting to be seriously old, and you look at this and you go, it's never been clearer that this is fundamentally changing the world. It's never been clearer that this is close to free to learn. The tools to learn it have never been easier, and that it's never been clearer that for a minimal amount of effort, a few weeks, a few months, you can get yourself massively ahead of the game.
Totally.
And yet, even with all of these things and seeing, as you know, talking there, unemployment, business evolution is coming, yet most people are just sitting there because it's too sore. It's not sore enough yet to go off the nail.
Yeah.
And by the time the tsunami comes along and fundamentally changes the work environment, it will be too late.
And if you work for the council, they won't let you use it anyway.
Yeah.
But I digress.
And there's whole swathes of society whose strategy is to opt out. Like if you're near retirement age, you're like, fuck it, I'm just
somebody
gonna,
else's problem. Yeah,
so
get
it
to the
seems like
finish
a
line.
nightmare. You know, my plan is to retire or die before this becomes a problem for me.
But enough about you, Steve.
All right, there you go,
Okay,
guys.
guys.
55 minutes in.
What are we, episode what?
Oh, 22, 23, it's one of the two.
23, I think it is. God
Another
damn.
couple have to look back at our beginning of the year predictions.
Oh, God.
Aye, it might
From
not
a
be
time,
bad to
from
do
a
like
time gone by.
Yeah.
It might not be bad to do a little checkpoint at some point through the year. What was this? This was episode 22. This one is.
22.
Well, I'll tell you
Wow.
what, it's been nice to be back.
Yes. And
It's been nice
great
to have you back, mate. And you're only away for a week or two before things start settling
that's
down
me
a wee bit,
finished
ain't you?
shortly for the year,
Yeah.
unless anyone needs a tour director at short notice.
Brilliant,
folks,
guys.
there you go. Episode 22 in the can.
Come on now.
All right, we're out here. Bye-bye.
No, stop.
Oh,
You're so used to not having Stephen here
Yes.
that you forgot there's a job to be done at the end of the show.
And only one
Stephen,
man who can really deliver on
Go.
that job.
wherever you may be, we don't charge for this. The advice is given free of charge. It's worth exactly the amount you paid for it. But in return, can we ask you, please, just like, subscribe, share wherever you find your podcast, or at worst comes to worst.
Oh, you're
at
getting really good at that.
www. The Roundtable Rethink.com.
Roundtablerethink.com.
That was smooth, mate. You're getting good at that.
Thank
now.
you. I've been listening to you guys.
All right, I'll try and sign off again. That's it. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Good night, everyone.